Following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, several statues have been vandalized or removed in several U.S. states, including Alabama and Pennsylvania, and further overseas in Bristol, England. This has sparked an international debate on whether or not protesters are doing the right thing. And this morning, we bring the discussion home as we hear from some local critics on their views on the matter. We have Dr. Deborah Hicklin Gordon, Communication and Culture and Development Specialist, author Annie Paul, and president of the United Negro Improvement Association, Stephen Golding. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, ladies.
This is what you call a power panel, right?
Yes. Deborah, let's start with, I'm going to start with you because your post is where I first saw the debate happening. What are your views on this issue?
All right. First of all, the downing of statues or the vandalism of statues is not unique to any political or racial struggle. It's something that gives an idea. It's a kind of litmus test of the extent of the anger. It's also a position that shows that demonstrates the victory of the protest over a particular issue. And it really often happens at the height of regime change or attempts to change a regime. My position comes from the perspective that there are some things, some dastardly things that exist that continue to help us to remind us of how it comes from a position of never ever forget. There are some things that can remain in order to remind us of the challenges that our people have faced over 500 years. Now, the post that I made yesterday, the kind of passion and the kind of the perspectives that came out of it, I thought were absolutely remarkable. And it was clear that it was time for this debate and many other like debates about race and class and so on. But my perspective is that, different nations in their history have celebrated particular persons, and that's an indication of who they are. And I think we must take sleep and mark that, and that we must teach our children who these people are. They still have those statues up, or still had those statues up. So that means that there is some indication of their assent, that they continue to believe that these monuments are necessary. And we need to be taking our children there and saying, this is this person. And this is what they have done. And now we need to build the monuments bigger, better, more impressive, with the storyboards and the storylines that tell us exactly what we need to know in order to propel our people forward. So there are some people who thought that my perspective was an all lives matter perspective. It really wasn't. It was a never ever forget perspective.
So you are for keeping the statues there and educating as opposed to downing them, Deb?
I don't think there's a right or wrong.
Okay.
Who's going to tell an angry mob that, stop. Don't down a statue. I think, the decisions that are made by charged protesters are also representative of the extent of their anger and rage and fury. And that's important too. One of the points, Camilla made the point that in and of itself is performance art. The act of moving it and dumping it into the ocean, the one in Bristol, is and of itself a part of the history that will be told about the persons who enslaved Africans.
Okay.
But there are many different perspectives, and we have to accept all ideas on the matter.
Yeah, Stephen, I wanted to ask you, just following up on what Deborah is saying, the need to recognize and remember, but are there some things and some things that we should also, in remembering, I think people feel that if you put a statue, you're almost celebrating them. And I remember in 2015 in Cape Town, there's a student who threw
Roads must fall.
Yeah, and said Rose must fall. So what is your perspective on this?
I think this is a part of the long road to reparatory justice. So you have to understand, I mean, particularly at this moment with the groundswell and the momentum that was sparked by the murder of George Floyd. I think this is definitely a direction that we've been talking about for a long time. I mean, even in the case of Jamaica, let's pay attention to some of the statues that we have here. Such as Christopher Columbus, who stands outside of the Marcus Garvey High School. We have a statue like Queen Victoria in a park that we've renamed for one of our own local heroes, but we have not put up a statue of him. These things are bound to happen because we have not addressed certain issues of reparations over the past. Now, while I'm not necessarily for the destruction of these statues, I do believe they need to come down. And I think they possibly need to come down and need to begin a negotiation with our former colonizers, because let us not forget that there are many artifacts that are being held by the English, the French, the Spanish, and others that were taken from countries, and that a demand has been made
To
for
take them
these
back.
artifacts to be
Come back,
returned.
yeah.
And it's funny because the British Museum, I believe a few days ago, put out a statement that they are in support and in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. But they, interestingly enough, did not mention the fact that they have denied a lot of these requests for the return of artifacts. There are many artifacts that were taken from Jamaica, some Taino
Yes.
pieces
Yes.
and others that we've been asking
Still
for.
there.
And the usual response is that we are not properly equipped to house them and keep them, almost as like a parent scolding a child. So I'm glad to see this conversation is being opened up by the momentum driven by the murder of George Floyd. And incidentally, I should mention the fact that the Jamaican who was killed in New Jersey or New York, that has been coming to light in the
Maurice
past few days,
Gordon, yeah.
adding fuel to the fire.
So, Stephen, you say take it down but don't destroy it. Deborah is saying there's no right or wrong. Education is key. Annie, can you weigh in? Let's get your position on this.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And yeah, so it's a very, very live debate that has been going on for a while now, since the Confederate statues in the US were toppled a few years ago. But I mean, how many of you, I know Deborah would know the answer to this, but how many of you have been to Bellevue Hospital in Kingston and seen a very imposing statue right at the front of a white person? I mean, when I saw it, I had no idea who it was, and I had to ask, I had to dig. Turns out it's a statue of a man called Louis Bowerbank. No one knows about him today. No one thinks about him. Very few people do. It was he who campaigned for a mental asylum or a mental hospital, and that is why a statue was erected in his honor. But today, it's just there. I mean, no one pays any attention. It's just this huge, imposing statue of a white person. And I think in his case, it's different. I don't know who made the decision to erect the statue, how the funds were raised, etc. But the other statues, the Queen Victoria, the others, especially in a country like Jamaica, where there isn't even a single really good statue of Marcus Garvey, but there are many statues of white people. I call that colonial hardware. You know, we really need to do something about correcting the balance in that landscape of cluttered objects, many of which don't represent us. I think on Deborah's Facebook thread, there was a very good suggestion yesterday from a colleague at UE, Ajamu Nangwayu, who said that he thought that statues should be moved we should have a museum of colonialism and imperialism. I think that's a great idea. And move all statues there, you know. But the point is that is when you're thinking of a policy regarding these statues. However, when there's a revolt going on or a revolution, you can't tell, as Deborah or somebody said, you can't tell the mob what to do and what not to do. So when they tear down a statue, it is a spontaneous thing. And it is not to be seen as an attack on history. As the Guardian in the UK points out today, it is history, you know?
Yep.
So we have to be
Simone,
careful.
you know, I should make the point also that it goes way beyond statues. I mean, right now, I've seen a petition going around for the renaming of
Yes,
places like Lady Musgrave
I've seen it.
Road, because of the legends behind, you know, the creation of Lady Musgrave Road being that the wife of the governor at the time did not want to pass George Stibel's house, which is Devon House,
Yes.
because of the wealth that this black man exhumed, and she felt that, you know, being a black man, he shouldn't have that kind of wealth. So we have issues like that, you know, the
You know,
names of our parishes, the names of some of these places.
Steve, we were talking about it this morning. Daly and I were in the makeup room before we came in. And maybe a part of the problem is that you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us do not know the legends, the
Absolutely.
stories, the history behind a lot of these things. It's the colonial hardware, as Annie put it. I love that term.
I love
The
that.
cluttered objects. And she speaks about policy. So I want to ask you guys, even as we wind down, what is the way forward in our context? With the situation that we have, that you have all touched on, how do we move forward to educate and to perhaps remove, is removal an option? Some of these pieces of colonial hardware, the remnants of our history that are not the greatest points of our history. What are our next steps as we look at what's happening around the world? Deborah, Dr. Hickling Gordon, let me start with you.
I think that, like all of our cultural policy in this space and time, there needs to be a process of national consensus on some of these matters. I believe that we need to make some holistic plans for these objectives. So it's not about a group of people in a boardroom saying we're going to take down this or we're going to put up that or we're going to do 12 sports path statues and no historical statues. Or it's about making some decisions about policy that are 30 years, that you know, a 30-year plan of how we're going to deal with these. Are we going to create the museum? Somebody spoke of a graveyard, a graveyard for colonial statues. There are a number of ideas that really should be brought to contend to policy, but it has to be a plan.
Yeah.
It can't be that this 5 years somebody's going to make a set of decisions, and in the next 5 years the next set of people are going to make a set of decisions. That's not sustainable.
Gotcha. And the involvement of the people, you say consensus is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Annie, your thoughts, and then we wrap up with Stephen.
Right. So I just want to give another example from the early 20th century. If you walked into the Institute of Jamaica, there was a national portrait gallery. However, there was not all the portraits in the National Portrait Gallery were exclusively of white males. Okay, this is the Jamaican National Portrait Gallery. So over the course of the 20th century, that was rectified by people like Edna Manley and Albert Huey and all the other artists in the Jamaican artist movement who set about painting images and sculpting images of the Jamaican population, right? And you would never walk into the Institute of Jamaica and see that farce today of you know, seeing people, an elite represented and not the people.
Right.
So I think that kind of rectifying movement has taken place in visual art, and with the statues, it's a matter of deciding what to do with them and taking a lot of care in erecting new ones. We shouldn't have the kind of fuss there was about the Garvey statue at the University of the West Indies a few years ago.
Okay, Stephen?
This is, as I said, the long road to reparations. So I think these things have to be dealt with from a point of view of discussing reparatory justice and coming up with reparatory policies. So, you know, we have to understand also it goes, again, beyond the monuments, beyond just the name of roads. Look at the fact that we have a number of preserved great houses on this island. And the great house, I think, is one of the greatest symbols of the institutionalization of racism and the creation of white supremacy that came out of the colonial days and out of the illegal trafficking in Africans. So there's a lot for us to talk about. There might be a lot of emotions behind it, you know, but it is all a part of the process of reparation, and we have to bear that in mind. And I think you made a good point, Simone, in terms of the level of education. It's not just a matter of emotionally taking down these images, but there are a lot of images that we should have put up a long time ago. Why is there not a statue of St. William Grant in St. William Grant Park? Look at issues in our history like Francis Williams, one of the first Black men to attend Oxford University. This is a man who came from Spanish Town. Nobody has ever heard of him. There's not a statue of him in Spanish Town, yet we have statues of old British naval officers who probably shuttled a couple slave ships across the Atlantic. This does not sit well with the psyche of a people who feel that they have been not only violated, but underappreciated, and in some extent hoodwinked and bamboozled by this idea of emancipation. We need a reality check, and I think the momentum being created around the world now gives us a great opportunity to do so.
All right, thank you very much, guys. A very, very interesting conversation, and we hope it continues, and in a much larger space, that Jamaicans become more knowledgeable and more interested and more active.
And I think it's important, based on what Stephen said, it would be nice to do a segment one morning on some of the folks like a Francis Williams, because a lot of, I'm learning a lot in this interview as well. There are many Jamaicans who've done amazing things. Yeah. And we don't talk about them enough, so people don't know. Yeah. So, great insights there. Thank you very much, everybody who joined us this morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Have a good morning, ladies.
Deborah, before we go, Deborah, our Smile family sends our condolences to you. We know you're still dealing with the loss of your dad. So, strength and love from everyone here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. The family does.
Yes. Thank you. Dr. Deborah Hickling-Gordon, Communication and Culture in Development Specialist, author Annie Paul, and President of the UNIA, Stephen Golding.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Girl Talk. Stay with us.